me off.
Okay. Pete, I'll wait till you give me thumbs up and then I'll go. How about that?
Yeah, I think let's get started here.
Terrific. Okay. Good morning. My name is Jamie Rubin. I'm the chairman of the board at the Regional Plan Association. And on behalf of RPA, I'd like to welcome you all to our first 3 events for the Connecticut Governor's Forum Series for the 2026 election season. I, of course, want to welcome Governor Ned Lamont for the first of these, and thank you very much, Governor, for participating in this very important conversation. For over 100 years, RPA has been the leading research, planning, and advocacy organization in the tri-state area, mapping out a positive vision for our region to be more prosperous, equitable, and sustainable. RPA does this by publishing once every generation a regional plan that outlines goals to achieve this vision. The 4th regional plan was published in 2017 and serves as the basis for how we determine our priorities as an organization, including, of course, for this election season in Connecticut. Terms like affordability and abundance particularly resonate with voters in this election cycle, but RPA has always taken a long-term view of how smart planning can make our region abundant and affordable for all of us. We've outlined bold but practical and achievable goals for Connecticut across 4 deeply related issue areas. The first is build more homes of all kinds where people thrive. The second is move Connecticut forward with modern, reliable transportation. The third is power Connecticut's clean energy future. And the 4th is rebuild state capacity for effective governance. We look very much forward to Governor Lamont's responses. And once again, thank everyone for attending. And I will now turn it over to our Connecticut director, Pete Harrison, to get into the conversation with the governor.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone, and especially Governor Lamont. I just wanted to say a quick public thank you again for keeping your word on bringing the housing bill back to special session in the fall. Our goal in this series and shortly today with Governor Lamont is to raise the issues that we believe are critical to delivering a better Connecticut today and in the long term, to help the voting public understand how you think about these issues, and to start what we hope to be a productive conversation through this election cycle into the next 4 years and beyond. This is not a debate, and we do not endorse candidates. It is just an educational platform to serve as a reference for the candidates and for voters. We have asked each of the campaigns for 45 minutes to cover questions on our 4 core issues, as well as an additional short lightning round, and finally, audience questions. We have shared topics, but not specific questions with each of the campaigns. In the interest of covering as many of our top priorities as possible, we have asked the candidates to be as concise as they can be on each question. I will not be asking follow-up questions, so that is where you, the audience, comes in. If you hear anything that you would like the candidate to expand on or don't hear something, please share it in the webinar's Q&A feature. Shorter questions without commentary will have a better chance of getting asked, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible at the end. This series is being streamed live on CTN, and we will be recording each forum. If there is a technical glitch at any point, we'll just pause and fix it and continue. We will then be posting each of these forums online and on our socials, so folks that couldn't attend today or the future series can watch. So look for those links in the near future. All right, let's get started. Good to go, Governor?
Good to go.
All right. Governor Lamont, Connecticut is often ranked among the states with the highest housing costs and lowest production, highest transportation energy costs, and largest property tax burden. Some of these problems are long-standing in Connecticut, and some are certainly part of broader national trends. At the same time, you have been governor for 2 terms through these struggles and are now asking voters for a 3rd term. We hope today's forum can cover what progress you've made, haven't made, and what your plans for a 3rd term would be. Our first topic is build more homes of all kinds where people thrive. Polls, including our own, show that housing costs continue to be one of the top concerns in our state, and we remain at or near the bottom of housing production in the country. Nearly 30% of homeowners and half of all home renters are considered housing cost burden, and there has been a 10% surge in homelessness just the last year. To increase affordability, security, and choice, we must build homes and more kinds of homes, particularly in smart places with transit and other infrastructure. First question, Governor Lamont, though you kept your word on calling a special session in the fall after vetoing 5002, the final bill was watered down and leaves a lot of questions for implementation. Now that the bill, Public Act 25-1, is law, How do you plan to ensure that the state, councils of government, and municipalities create ambitious housing growth plans and follow through?
Well, look, thanks, Pete and Jamie and everybody. By the way, I love RPA. More important than ever, we'll talk about housing, we'll talk about transportation, we'll talk about environment. Going back 5 years, COVID, you just realize these state borders are sometimes artificial. We are part of a region, and the better we coordinate with each other, the better off we are. Pete, specifically about housing, I'll counter a little bit. We're building more housing today than any time in the last 20 years or so. You know why? We need it. A lot of people want to be here in Connecticut. More people are staying here in the state of Connecticut. 20 years ago, the housing was mainly single family housing. Today, most of the housing being built is multifamily housing. Our cities for 80 years were shrinking in size. We already didn't have very big cities. Today, our cities are growing again. And that's part of our plan for the state in terms of making sure there's affordable housing, multifamily housing, housing for single people, housing for young people, workforce housing, supportive housing, not just in our cities, but widely dispersed across the state. And you're right, we passed this housing bill in the special session. I'll tell you why it was really important to me and how I made adjustments from the first bill. This bill had buy-in from mayors and first selectmen. I just think that it's very important that the folks who are going to be implementing this are at the table. The first round, we really didn't have mayors or first selectmen on board. And you were there with us when we announced the bill, and we had a Republican and Democratic first selectmen and mayors there. We're giving them incentives to do the right thing. So far, it's working. It's not just our big cities, but even Darien and Wilton, they had more new housing construction, multifamily included, per capita than they've ever had before. But we have a way to go because, again, people want to be here. And I'll just say one other thing about housing. It's about affordability. It's making sure that 30-something can afford their first home. I love the programs we have. I like the mortgage subsidies. We really prioritize teachers, firemen, cops who work in a town to be able to live in that town. And I'll just say, reach out to the business community. They're on board with this program. They say, I am not going to do any expansion in your state or any state where there's not housing for the next generation of workers to be. That's why it's important. I think we're making progress, but I'm running again because we got a way to go.
Increasingly across the country, outdated building and fire codes have been seen as a barrier to building small, missing middle multifamily housing, something you just spoke a little bit about. And often these have higher homeownership opportunities that we specifically desire in Connecticut. Do you plan to take a lead in reforming, administratively or legislatively, Connecticut's building codes to encourage safe reforms like single stairway, smaller elevators, and generally encouraging more innovative building models?
Yeah, we've done some already. We've certainly extended building code timelines from 3 years to 6 years, just so that builders have a little better opportunity to anticipate. But I think your question is really good, Pete. I mean, we always think about housing costs as always, related to, zoning and the high price of land and the such, but it's also building costs are dramatic. So if there's anything we can do in terms of manufactured housing or more importantly, adjusting codes so you don't compromise safety, but make sure that we can build houses faster, more efficiently, and less expensively, let's do that.
Other states, red, blue, purple, are driving ambitious pro-homes agendas with substantive zoning reform laws. Realtor.com just gave Connecticut an F grade for the second year in a row and categorized us as the stagnant bottom. Obviously, it takes time to develop some of these things. But what additional zoning reforms do you think are needed to move the needle in Connecticut?
Well, let's start with what we did in the housing bill. We're speeding up permitting and making real reforms that make it easier for you to build housing, especially in commercial areas as of right, especially commercial buildings. Let's face it, we're a hot residential market. People want to be here. Hartford, Connecticut, that region is probably one of the hottest in the country right now. We're speeding up that process as of right in commercial zones, as of right to convert commercial into residential, as of right in transit-oriented development, stuff we've worked on very closely with RPA. I got to get cars off the road. One way to do it is to make it easier for you to walk to rail or walk to bus and get to work. That's important for our economic growth, and it's important for folks who live in the area. So those are the changes we've already implemented, and they are going forward right now. And but we'll work with you to see what other changes should be made.
That's a good segue to our next topic, moving Connecticut forward with modern, reliable transportation. Our state has some of the worst highway congestion, above average lengths of commutes, and some of the highest household transportation costs in the nation. In addition, nearly 30% of households in Connecticut, in cities like Hartford and New Haven, do not own a car and must rely on transit system, unfortunately with limited utility. A more robust and reliable transit system would benefit all of us and is also key to our economic and environmental goals. First question, RPA believes buses should be the top priority for enacting this vision. But currently, we have a very disjointed network of 17 systems with limited frequency connections and unintegrated fare boxes. How will you create a fast and fair bus network?
So you're right. Fewer and fewer people have cars. I've got to make sure that they can get to work, get to school, get around, get to a doctor's appointment. Particularly complicated in our more rural areas, as you can imagine, Pete, where we have less, connectivity there. I'll just back up for 1 second. You're right. There's more traffic on the roads today than was ever anticipated in the 50s when this stuff was built. We've got a heat map. We can see all those exits and entrances. We have more per mile than just about any state because these are old roads and everybody has that. We're speeding that up by improving the exits. But more importantly, more frequent, faster, modern rail. I'll get the bus in a second, don't worry. So getting some of those cars off the road, make it easier to get back and forth. You'll be able to get to from Stamford to New York today. You'll be able to get from Bridgeport to New York in the same amount of time. So really opening up the catch basin for housing. Buses, here's what I did during COVID. We made bus service free. I just thought it was insane to see all these half-empty buses going around. There's nothing more expensive than driving around an empty seat. We're having some back and forth with the Trump administration on doing that, but at least we've eliminated fares for veterans, cut the fares for students, trying to get more frequent, more regular rail service. But your bigger question, Pete, is we have all these independent bus districts. Garrett Euclida, our amazing head of transportation, is working to get them better coordinated because bus service doesn't stop at the border. Bus service has to take you to and fro. You know about the busway we have from, say, New Britain into Hartford, going not too far from you. A lot of people use that. It's an express bus lane. We're doing Hamden into New Haven the same way. That requires a more regional approach, and that's what Garrett's working on right now.
I do have a rail question, so ready for that. Our proximity to New York City and the Northeast Corridor via rail is a major economic and social advantage, but trains are slower today than they were decades ago. In your inaugural address in 2019, you called for the 30-30-30 plan, which for folks, it's 30 minutes from Hartford to New Haven to Stamford, etc. What progress have you made on that, and do you still believe that will happen in a third term?
I think we're making actually pretty good progress. I'm afraid it's an 8-year process. Certainly new rail cars, certainly straighten out the rails. Here's a little fact that straighten out means you can get a faster acceleration. Amtrak slows down when it goes through Connecticut, just a little aside. We have more twists and turns. If we were China, we'd go right over Mrs. O'Gillicuddy's home and have a straight line and be able to go 180 miles an hour. We're not China, so we have to deal with what we got. But one thing we can do is our bridges. I don't know, these bridges were all seen to be built by Teddy Roosevelt and William McKinley. And trains slow down over the bridge, then speed up again. So, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we're redoing most of these major rail bridges and car bridges. And, that will, again, everyone will add, take 2 or 3 minutes off. I think you're going to see a good half an hour, 20 to 30 minutes taken off of your rail commute, Bridgeport, Stamford, New York, and up towards Hartford and on to Springfield and Bradley Airport. The other thing we're doing, just as an aside, is rebuilding our rail stations. The Waterbury line, all along the Naugatuck Valley. I love the Naugatuck Valley. They're building a lot of housing, a lot of transit-oriented housing right next to the rail stations. And in turn, we're having more frequent rail service. And, also that allows more rail to get around. So those are the priorities we've got right now, and I think it's working.
Yeah, we've done a number of our walk audits around some of those new stations and are very excited by some of the progress that local governments are driving in some of those places.
Hey, Pete,
Very relatedly,
can I just mention one interesting thing about it?
absolutely.
It may be of interest to your folks. We're actually shutting down the Waterbury line for a matter of months, just because we can rebuild those train stations in half the time and half the cost if you don't have to interface in and around the rail. It's interesting, the same thing with the bridges. We could rebuild a bridge in half the time and half the cost, but you can't do that. You've got to keep the transportation going. So that's the balance we're trying to get.
Yeah, fair enough. Stable funding is a critical need for good public transit, including bus, rail, and microtransit. But your administration has reported at various times that the main source of transit funding, the Special Transportation Fund, is in trouble. How do you plan to fund the types of investment we're doing now or need to do in the future for transit?
Well, we came into office, almost 8 years ago, and the Special Transportation Fund was on fumes. There was nothing in there. And the federal government was saying, if you can't come up with your 10 or 20% copays, you're not going to get any help from the feds. You're on your own. So, we addressed that a couple of different ways, put some of the sales tax into the fund, obviously kept the gas tax going. And whenever Trump invades another country and the price of gasoline goes up, we get a little more revenues off of that. And we had some back and forth, and we ended up with a highway user fee on the big tractor trailer trucks. So that's raising us another $60 or $70 million. We're able to pay down some of our debt in the transportation fund over the last year, which saves us some money. So we're in a pretty good solvent position now. But longer term, you're absolutely right, Pete. We got to look at our alternatives and see what the lay of the land is.
All right. Our third topic is Power Connecticut's clean energy future. In recent years, the state has passed climate objectives for a 45% reduction in greenhouse emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. Connecticut is currently projected to achieve just a 34% and 44% reduction, respectively, falling short of our goals. Furthermore, even though Connecticut generates a considerable amount of power for New England, our residents have the fourth highest utility bills in the nation. We must modernize our energy infrastructure and oversight to transition to a more affordable and energy strategy. First question, despite our emission mandates, many advocates do not think they are ambitious enough given the scale of the climate crisis. Do you agree with the state's current emission goals? Why or why not?
Look, New England has some of the highest electric prices in the country, not just Connecticut. We're all part of the same region. And we've had some of the highest electric prices over the last, 50, 70 years. What do you do about it is your bigger question, Pete. And unlike a lot of other states, we kept nuclear power going, which is our biggest source of carbon-free power. We're negotiating that as well. We did a hedge against natural gas, so that's allowed us to reduce or eliminate the public benefits charge, at least for the next year. So we're making some progress in terms of bringing down costs. More importantly, as you point out, what are you doing in terms of the environment? Not easy in this Washington environment right now. We are turning on something called Revolution Wind, which is probably one of the biggest offshore wind projects. We had it about 80% complete, $5 billion invested, private money invested. Trump administration shut it down. We got it turned back on again. I told Orsted, the developer, build fast because you never know. And they shut it down again right before Christmas. We got it open. So those turbines are beginning to turn. We're making enough carbon-free power for about 300,000 homes between us and Rhode Island. What we're doing in terms of hydro and solar, energy efficiency. But we got some headwinds. A lot of those credits for energy efficiency, and as I said, wind, are going away in the Trump administration. But it's really important for this state. And it's really important for this country. There's only so much a little state of Connecticut can do by itself. We have CO2 emissions. They're, floating up from West Virginia right now. So expand the reach of the Regional Plan Association so we can work on this together, Pete.
You've talked about this a bit already in your previous question, but according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the current mix of generation in Connecticut is 62% gas oil, 34% nuclear, 1% renewable, but we'll kick up to 5%, as you said, with the Revolution Wind finally coming online, and then 1% hydro. What do you think is the ideal mix of energy source?
Well, again, I look at green, I look at reliability, and I look at affordability. And I don't know where RPA is on this, but I do tend to think that nuclear power is going to be a big piece of New England's future. We have Millstone, they've got Seabrook up there in New Hampshire. We've had it for 60 plus years. It provides reliable, always-on, carbon-free power. And I'm in negotiations with Millstone and Dominion about what we do going forward. It just an aside for your information. Right now, they're not eager to build, say, fusion or new modular nukes here in the state of Connecticut. You say, why is that? We have no political pushback with something we need. It's because we're deregulated. So, Jamie, you may say, boy, that's a little counterintuitive. But what they tell us is, look, I like going into a regulated market like Georgia or Virginia, where all the cost overruns are borne by the ratepayers. Not in Connecticut, they'd be borne by the shareholders. So those are the type of things we have to navigate as we try and get more carbon-free power into our state.
That segues a bit into the third question, which is RPA and other leading climate groups agree that a transition to renewable energy is one of the primary long-term solutions to lowering costs. However, voters demand action now. How do we balance the short-term relief that voters want with these long-term investments to lower costs structurally?
I think that solar and efficiency is part of our housing and building strategy is so important. And we have the Energy Efficiency Fund. So I'm able to go out and tell a middle-class homeowner in Willimantic, they've got a house that was built in the 1970s. We can come in, we can reduce your electric prices by $100-200 a month. With energy efficiency, get rid of some of those old appliances. We go in as your partner. We put a lot of the money up front, saves you money. And this is obviously energy you don't use does not create any pollution. I've got to show Pete that this is real for people every day to make sure I'm not just asking them to sacrifice, but I can make a difference in their lives and keep to our environmental aspirations.
All right. Our final topic is rebuilding state capacity for effective governance. Connecticut's significant needs in housing production, public transit modernization, and energy grid transformation depend on the state's capacity to implement them. After decades of fiscal constraints, in many cases, state agencies, COGS, and local governments are under-resourced, lack necessary technical assets, and have limited strategic clarity and coordination between each level of government. If we want to solve our state's biggest crises, we do need to rebuild the machinery of efficient government. So let's start with cities. In your 2025 State of the State, you'd said our city should be 50% bigger. We agree. What is your strategy in a possible third term to unlock the potential of our urban centers?
Well, as I've suggested before, I mean, we're making the biggest investment in our cities ever, not just education funding and municipal aid, but transportation, those corridors. Look at New Haven right down the way. There you've got Union Station right next to it. We're going to have hundreds of units of housing there. You've got the Express Busway taking Hamden right in, as we discussed before. I need strong, vibrant cities, and that allows me to protect a lot of open space in other parts of the state. And I also like cities that are, a short bus ride or even a walk to a park. Utah, you got great parks, but they're all 500 miles away, often tourist destinations. Not in Connecticut. We're trying to make sure our cities are integrated with the broader community. That includes what our parks and beaches are able to accommodate.
If you had a magic wand, Governor, what three things would you change to create a more integrated, innovative, and fiscally sustainable state bureaucracy to meet those conservation and development goals?
I think you nailed it, Pete. We're a state that doesn't really dig regional solutions. I'll just be blunt about it. We got 169 towns. They like to be really feisty in their independence. They all have their own building inspector. They all have their own curriculum directors. We have 169 of everything. And that's one of the reasons our property taxes are relatively high. So what I'm doing is working with our councils of government. Those are our COGS, as you know about. Let's talk about housing. We put in place, look, extra resources for our COGs. We're going to come up with a housing goals. They're going to go down to the COGs. The COGs will figure out how we do that on a regional basis. They will work with the towns. They'll provide the planning and support there. Along the way, we also have building inspectors and others. So for those smaller towns that can't afford to do this on a full-time basis, using incentives and saving these towns money, that's how we're making the COGs more effective and more efficient. I think it's probably the best way to go and most effective way to go. I can't just sit around mandating things, but I got to bring people along with us. And I think the COG is going to be a big piece of our future.
You mentioned this, the sort of long-term resistance to regionalization, but not surprisingly, RPA is interested in smart regional governance. And you alluded to this a little bit, but obviously many voters and municipalities are worried about local property tax burden, which does come from having a lot of different redundancies. You spoke a little bit about working with COGs and not wanting to mandate things, but do you see some form of regionalization from the state as a way to address the strain on municipal budgets while encouraging a strategic statewide growth target?
Yeah, encouraging and incentives. That's the way I work. And by the way, Pete, you see a lot of our towns, especially our smaller towns, working together much more collaborative than they were, say, 10 or 20 years ago. And sometimes that's a regional school district even, because a lot of our smaller towns are not gaining population, they're losing student population. Again, I try and bring the mayors along on this, and I think we're making some savings. Other thing about property tax, usually it's I want more state money to go into our towns and cities, and we're working on that every day. One of the regional things that I think make the most sense is just rather than more money, you figure out how you want to spend it. I don't like funding the status quo. I like to think about how we can do things better. Special education is crushing our local school budgets, cities as well as towns, especially our towns. I think this is something where the state ought to be taking the lead. The state ought to take that burden off of the shoulders of local towns. I think it's better for the kids. They don't have to go a mile, 100 miles to Massachusetts or something. We can save them dramatically, have more local regional solutions for special ed, and save the local taxpayers a heck of a lot of dough.
Yeah, I get in trouble sometimes in Simsbury talking about the virtues of multifamily development as a way to bring in kids since our school enrollment's declining, bring in tax revenue, more business opportunities. And I think, there's a, steady habits vibe in Connecticut that I think sometimes works against us. But I think at heart, people understand that connection between the vibrant local economies, stable property values, and just bringing in new generations of kids and resources. So I'll keep working at the local level on that at least. Okay, so congratulations. You've wrapped up the 4 priority core issues for our 2026 priorities. Now we're on to our lightning round. Just a reminder to audience members, which I think they've been doing, but if you heard anything or didn't hear anything, please put a question in the webinar Q&A and we'll get to them after this lightning round question. So, Governor, these are really short answers, even one answers in some cases. We'll start off with a couple of softballs here. What is your favorite building in Connecticut?
The old State House. I'm sort of a history buff. It's right there. Goes back to right after right after the Revolution. This is a revolutionary state. We're the heart and soul. So I love going there. I love seeing the history. I love telling the kids what it means.
What is your favorite Connecticut park?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm here in Hartford, so I'm right next to Elizabeth Park, and I like to take walks there. I find it cheaper than a therapist and just as therapeutic.
Yeah, and the Rose Garden's gorgeous. My wife and son went there this spring. Okay, favorite non-Connecticut city in the U.S.?
I got to tell you, I just think the Big Apple is many ways the center of the universe. And I always think about Connecticut as being part of that greater orbit. I know how important it is. I love the diversity. I love the energy. I love the internationalism. I put that right near the top since I wasn't allowed to mention 169 Connecticut towns or cities.
Yes, we made that easier for the candidates not to pick a favorite. Okay, so tomorrow is the launch of one of the parts of Public 25-1, the parking reform, which was something we were very excited about. Just as an overall broad strokes, parking in Connecticut, too much, not enough, or just right?
Well, it sort of depends where you are. I mean, I'm at Hartford, which is like nothing but parking lots as far as I can see, and fewer people are coming into the city. So we're turning parking lots into housing. That's what we're doing in Hartford. In some of our other towns, more in the southern part of the state, parking is an issue. But look, we made some reforms in our housing bill. 16 or fewer units, we're not going to get you hung up on a lot of parking requirements. Trying to make it easier and faster for you to be able to build housing for people who need it.
This is a more abstract question, and you have some leeway, but I want to try to have a specific answer as possible. What should the population of Connecticut be by 2050? It's about 3.6 million now, give or take.
What did you say, 2050?
Yeah.
Bigger. I believe that we were a state that was shrinking for many, many years, and we were getting older and older. And as I said, our cities were shrinking. We turned that around. More people, especially coming out of COVID, moved to the state. And even now with migration, international migration, our state is continuing to grow. I think that energy and dynamism of more young people wanting to be here and stay here is really important. And the irony is one of the reasons we have this housing issue is because a lot of people want to be here, and more people are living alone. I think that's some RPA ought to be looking at a little bit. When I was growing up, maybe 10% of people lived alone. Now it's closer to 30%. So that's necessarily changing demand in housing stock without actually growing the population. But I think we should be a good 10 to 20% bigger.
Okay, I was going to ask for roughly a number, so you saved it at the end. And yes, I will plug RPA. We are looking into some of those demographic changes, and we actually have a big report coming out, Homes on Track, Part 2, on July 28th, which we'll talking a little bit about some of the demographics around housing. Okay, at the federal level, just one question. Congress just passed the 21st Century Road to Housing Act with overwhelming bipartisan votes in both chambers. Would you urge President Trump to sign that bill? I guess he got it delivered to him last night. What would your argument be for him to sign that?
Sign it right now. You're not serious about affordability and economic growth and opportunity unless you get housing right. This bill, where Murphy and Blumenthal helped take a big role in that, our senators, in many ways models after what we did when we did our housing bill. It gives towns and cities extra incentives to build. It does speed up permitting. I like the fact that it says slow down those big institutional buyers who are coming into a community and buying up an awful lot of rent, and then maybe driving up the price there. I think it makes some pretty good innovations. I hope to God he signs it.
Yeah, we were working with Senator Murphy a little bit on the bill and Representative Himes, so we're certainly supportive of it and hope he signs it. Okay, next question. What was your last trip on a bus, a train, and a bike?
Let's see here. Yeah, this is tricky. Obviously, the busway and some of those things, often I do it with a pressing toe, but just to show how important, this is a bus and rail state. I cannot build any more highways, so I try and tell that story every chance I can. I've certainly taken, Metro North, and Hartford all the way down as well, just to tell the story about, what the state's going to look like and why you want to live next to a rail station. Bike, I don't know. I used to run marathons. Then I did biking. I didn't really dig biking, so I haven't been on a bike in a couple of years.
Fair enough. All right. Two final questions in lightning round here. Where are you spending the 4th of July this year?
You kidding? Right here. The Boombox Parade in Willimantic, Connecticut. You will love it, Pete. You've never been there. We're so poor, we can't afford a marching band, so bring your boombox. And we'll end up at Hartford, where we've got the symphony playing and amazing fireworks. And along the way, just extraordinary Revolutionary War experiences. They'll be burning Benedict Arnold in effigy a little later up in New London. He burnt down that city a while back. Wethersfield, Connecticut, where you had Rochambeau and Washington meet to decide how to end the Revolutionary War down in Yorktown. So we're going to be busy over the next couple of months right here.
All right, last lightning round question. Who do you got winning the World Cup?
I think I have France. I'm not an expert on this. I was more a Knicks guy, but I talked to a lot of people younger than me. I'm going with France.
All right. So for our final few minutes here, we will be turning to audience member questions, which I think, been provided to me. And just as a reminder, Governor, so these are just questions from audience members over the last 4 responses for our core issues. So first audience question. What role do you feel that the state plays in responding to homelessness and housing unaffordability? What would you do differently in your final term in office to address housing costs that you have not done before?
I'll tell you what we want to expand on, because I think the state has got to take the lead on homelessness. We're making some real progress, falling back, just given it's such a hot real estate market. The landlords feel like they're in the driver's seat and they're pushing back. I had a bill last time around that said those big out-of-state buyers of rental homes stopped. You can't raise the rent without investment for at least a year, just to give people some breathing room. We have fair rent commissions just to give a little more flexibility in a place you can go, especially a lot of our immigrant families feel really much under threat from the landlords there. We've also created a new program. We call it our Opportunity Centers. So if you're homeless, you can go in there. Not only do we find you a place to stay, but we also can help in terms of Medicaid and SNAP. And just as importantly for me, just not a lifeline, but a ladder. If childcare is an issue, addiction is an issue, workforce training, these opportunity centers are a way to get people out of homelessness and get them a better opportunity.
All right, a housing related question here. How do you plan to ensure that new housing is truly deeply affordable for older adults, for families who live and work full-time in those areas, and protect what affordable housing currently exists before people lose their homes?
Yeah, I think by the end of this year, we'll have built more affordable housing than anybody else here in Connecticut ever. And you're right. The housing is a variety of different places. It can be workforce housing, it can be supportive housing, and as you point out, deeply affordable housing. And that's what we got to double down on. I was just in Norwalk yesterday, where they got, I think more deeply affordable housing right in their area there. And it's beautiful. I got to show people, don't get this horrible stereotype of affordable housing. It can be very attractive, a community there with a child care center right around the way. And that's what we're building on. I took a lot of the opioid treatment money, Pete, which was, tens of millions of dollars a year, and using that for wraparound services aligned with housing, just so people not only get a roof over their head, but the support services they need. But Pete, we got a way to go, but it's a real priority for me.
A good question. And we were just talking about this before opening up the webinar. And I don't know about you, Governor, but I may be wearing shorts off camera here. But what can the state do in the long term to be more resilient in the face of increasingly extreme heat?
Well, let's keep moving off of fossil fuels. That's a long-term solution. It doesn't help you out much this weekend. We have our cooling centers. We sent out the advisory, virtually every town, and certainly every region. It can be a town hall. It can be a library. It's the Armory in Hartford. Air conditioning, take care of you, water support, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. And if you have a grandparent or somebody elderly, just check on them and do the right thing.
And I think as a follow-up on the emission goals question, it wasn't clear from your response, Governor, are you intent on meeting the state's climate emission goals?
Right now, I think it's 2040. We're on track to do that, but I got to confess to you, it's a lot tougher. If we're going to get no support on, wind, if we're going to get no support on efficiency, it slows things up. But we are getting good support on transportation. Back to Pete's other question, that's where a lot of the pollution is transportation, car related. There, I think we're going to make real progress over the next 10 years.
Okay. And I apologize. This is going to be the last question, everybody. There were some phenomenal questions, and I appreciate everybody responding to that. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to everything. But one of the major roadblocks to affordable housing is the time it takes to access public funding. CHAFA and DOH could make substantial changes to decrease redundancy and time delays, but seemingly have not been open to doing so. How willing are you in a third term to insist on DOH making those changes?
I'll push back a little bit. I think they are making those changes. I'm the first governor that comes out of the business world, and time is money. I hear that from developers all the time. We were at a big major housing ribbon cutting in Hartford a few years ago, and the developer said something which I liked. I'll see whether your members like it as much. He said, "Look, I didn't get quite as much money from Lamont for this project as I would have gotten from some of his predecessors, but I got it a hell of a lot faster. And that was even more important." And that's what I'm trying to do, to stretch the dollars to make sure that we can provide the subsidies and support. It's a layer cake of financing. It's really complicated, from deeply affordable right to workforce housing, make sure that's possible and faster.
All right. Well, I think that is about all the time we have for today. On behalf of RPA, of course, I want to thank you, Governor Lamont, for participating this morning during your campaign. Thank everybody in the audience for participating and submitting questions. We will be continuing this series later today at noon with Representative Josh Elliott, and on July 9th at 11 a.m. with Senator Ryan Fazio. We will be posting this recording soon and have a few events coming up that we'll share in the chat, including a nonpartisan pro-homes candidate training on July 28th. And then, as I had mentioned earlier, report release from RPA outlining opportunity around our transit and bus stations on July 29th. So stay tuned for those events to sign up there. And just a reminder, the Democratic primary is on Tuesday, August 11th, and the general election is on November 3rd. All right, everybody. Thank you, Governor, and have a happy and safe 4th of July.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Jamie.